My name is Ranjit Prabhu, and my colleague here with me from AWS Billing, who will be coming up after my session, is Matt Leonard. Here is your bill. It looks complicated, but it's not. Our goal is to give you accurate, timely, and transparent billing data. AWS has a very rich and flexible product offering to give you maximum flexibility and choice. And so you need this detail in your bill to help you understand your use of AWS. In today's session, I'll walk you through the mechanics so you can decode your bill. I'll talk about the inputs and permutations that determine the line items on your bill. And Matt will then do all the cool stuff. He'll talk to you about all the features we have launched this year and some exciting ones that are coming up that will make it easy for you to understand and to use AWS billing. So in its simplest form, your bill has line items, and those line items represent cost. Cost in the cloud is usage times rate. It's pretty straightforward. AWS services, S3, EC2, RDS, and so on, meter your usage of their products. There are different rates for different kinds of usage, and we put the two together to produce line items. So let's look at those two key components, the usage and the rates, because that's at the heart of your billing. Your traditional IT infrastructure, we had two notions of cost. There was capital cost and there was operating cost. And you went through the motions and figured out your capital cost once a year, twice a year. You had an operating cost profile, and you put the two together and you knew your burn rate. With the cloud, we take this traditional IT infrastructure and chunk it up because it's elastic and it's on demand. And so we break it up into these standard units and represent them to our customers and say, here's a unit of compute, here's a unit of storage. And we associate rates with those. And so it's a very different kind of bill and a very different kind of costing for cloud. Some other interesting things about usage. All of the AWS services meter your usage hourly on the coordinated universal time zone. And so all of AWS follows UTC. And we use the calendar month to close your bills. There's a little map over there, and the yellow dots show you 9 regions. AWS over time has built up this globally distributed infrastructure. And what this means is your usage records follow an eventually consistent model. And so throughout the day, every hour and throughout the day and the month, we keep updating your view of your usage and the corresponding estimated bill that goes with it. And at the end of the month, we run a series of terminal actions to finalize and close your bills and ship them to you. These terminal actions are to ensure consistency because it's a globally distributed infrastructure. So your usage of the cloud today generates a lot of data. And we take that data and process it in the billing pipeline. This is where we count your usage by distinct dimensions or counters or buckets. We say, here's a bucket of your EC2 M1 medium usage, M1 small usage, and so on, S3 storage, puts, gets. So we have a counter for each of these unique dimensions. We merge those counters with rates to produce costs, and then we compose your bills in many different ways for your convenience. And we show you the line items that show you these costs that you have incurred. So the other side of our cost story is rates. It was reasonably straightforward when we started out. In 2006, there was one product. There were a few operations that you could perform against that product. And so this meant a very simple rate card. You would use this, and at the end of the month, we'd assign that simple rate card to your usage, and you'd get a bill. What's happened since then is we've gone from one product to 33 main products. And each of those products has several sub-products. That's what we refer to as usage type in your billing artifacts, such as your CSV file and elsewhere. And you also have operations that go against those products. So a product is EC2, a usage type is box usage, and an operation is run instance. That's just one simple example. But you take the 33 main products that we have today, break them up into the sub-products, and apply the operations that go with it, and you're into the hundreds of rates. So if you use one of everything, you have a bill with line items in the hundreds. Along the way, we introduced reserved instances. This is a way for you to plan your capacity. The predictability that comes from your capacity planning helps us plan our capacity, and that gives us cost savings. We pass those cost savings on to you. In the context of rates, what that means is you multiply the rates. So if we have a rate card for on-demand, the same rate card gets multiplied, and you have an equivalent rate card for reserved instances. And so the hundreds of rates continue to grow. And then we started with one region, and we're now in 9. And so each time you go to a new region, your rates continue to grow. And you have somewhere in the thousands of rates at this point, between 4,000 and 5,000. And each time we add a region, there's a multiplier effect on that. And so all of these contribute to the line items on your bill. So usage allocation, or counting your usage by these distinct dimensions, these thousands of rates that represent these distinct dimensions, is at the core of bill computation. You set up these counters and you count each account's usage. And you say, and once you've built the counter, you marry it with the rates. It's worth revisiting reserved instances. Because AWS does month-to-date billing on the UTC clock, in the past, let's go back, dial back pre-reserved instances. All that mattered was a month-to-date bill. You just had on-demand rates. There wasn't really a significant interest in the hourly bill. There was nothing of particular interest. But with reserved instances, there's a difference between concurrent use and serial use. And so if you have, let's say, 2 reserved instances, you care about how many you're using concurrently in an hour, because up to 2 gets you the discounted rate, and more than that, you start paying on demand, and you might want more reserved instances. And so you have an interest in hourly level grain on these same line items. And so there are 744 hours in a 31-day month, and so that's 3 orders of magnitude on the line items that you already have, just because you're interested in knowing your costs. A little bit on, while we're still on cost, is our goal is to always give you the lowest cost bill, regardless of whether you intended it to be that way or not. So if you, for example, there's free tier, if your account is less than 365 days old, you're eligible for free tier on various products, and there are different definitions of what that means. One example is micro-instance usage. You get 750 free hours. Now the subtlety here is that if you happen to use micro-instance in Tokyo and Singapore, Tokyo is marginally more expensive for micro-instance. So we would apply those to your free tier to give you the cheaper bill. Another example is if you have multiple reserved instance subscriptions that you've purchased over time, those could have different hourly rates. And so we would pick the cheapest rate and apply that to the usage that we saw first to give you the lowest cost bill. And then progressively go up to the more expensive reserved instance rates. And of course, we would end at the on-demand rate, which is the most expensive on the card. And so this is how we compose your bill line items. Those are some examples. And you get a line item for each of these distinct combinations. And we also talked about the impact that time has. Reserved instances, the 744 hours in a month, on these line items. So where you used to be satisfied with one line item, both AWS and you as our customer are now interested in those 744 line items. One last thing is there are a few events that impact the line items or determine the line items on your bill. And so the first one is changes in accounts. For those of you who are familiar with consolidated billing, or actually even for those who are not, consolidated billing allows you to link one account to another account and designate that other account as the payer. And so you get the benefit of one payer and one bill for multiple accounts. It's good for an enterprise where divisions want complete isolation, meaning they have an AWS account for each division or group or department, but they want the bills to roll up into one payer that represents the company. Now when you do this, let's say you have 20, 30, 40 accounts linked in a large corporation. That corporation is a living organization, and so it keeps morphing. And so this consolidated billing relationship keeps morphing with it. One department's folded into another one is split into two, and so on and so forth. Sometimes there's a merger between two companies and one company takes over. And so you change the payer, so the whole family changes. And you can keep doing that. This feature of consolidated billing gives you that flexibility. It has a little interesting impact on your bill because now what you've done is in a standard month, you've taken the 30 days and chunked it into 3 segments by making all these changes. And so this example account is linked to payer A for part of the month, and it's linked to payer B for another part of the month, and it's responsible for its own charges in between. So where it would have normally seen one line item for, let's say, one specific dimension, it'll now see 3 line items, one in blue that it's actually responsible for that period, and the other 2 that are allocated line items from those 2 pairs. So the pair is actually responsible for the bill, but you see these as what we call allocated line items, ones that you're not actually, it's not a real bill, it's a chargeback. Regardless, you do get these 3 line items. The second one is subscriptions. So you have different subscriptions. These have different terms. You've signed up over different periods, and they end at different times. And so here's an example with 3 subscriptions. You have 2 distinct reserved instance subscriptions and an on-demand subscription. And they end at different times. And so where you would have got 1 line item, you get 3. And of course, companies are progressively ramping up their reserved instance purchases and other subscriptions. And so these can run into large numbers, number of concurrent subscriptions for the same unique dimension. And all of these multiply the line items on your bill. And the last one is pricing. AWS has made many price changes, over 20 in the last 5 years. We have a history of passing on our cost savings that we realized from economies of scale and from our own maturity. We have a history of passing that on to our customers. And so on average, 20 plus changes in 5 years, reductions, gives you a change almost every quarter or so. And so you'll see this quite often where you'll get 2 line items for what would have been 1 in a month where there was no price change, just because we show you the 2 different rates. And so these are all the things that determine what happens to your bill. And so now I'm going to hand over to Matt. This is your bill again. And Matt's going to talk about all the interesting features that we have and ones that we're launching to help make it easy for you.
Clicker, thank you. Good morning, my name is Matt Leonard. I work with RMG on the AWS billing team. I'm responsible for the product management of AWS billing and working on the features that we roll out to you. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we've launched and some things that we're working on to make understanding this a little bit easier. Oops. There we go. So I'm going to talk about our features in the context of Joe. So Joe's been assigned as the financial analyst for his company, and he's in charge of managing the AWS bill and managing chargebacks for his company. So Joe's new to AWS. He's trying to figure out what he needs to do to get started. So let's help Joe out a little bit. So his first problem, Joe needs to get access to AWS billing data. Traditionally, before 2012, the only way to get access to the data was via the root account credentials. So what have we been doing to help Joe and make his life a little easier? So the first thing we did was launch IAM access to AWS billing. AWS billing is separated from management of resources insofar as your resource management is in the console, your billing data is in the portal. So traditionally, we haven't had IAM access within the portal, and that's something that we worked on. So we'll cover these in a little bit more detail in a second. The second feature that we worked on this year is programmatic access to billing data. It's not a traditional fully featured API, but what we've given you is access to your billing data via an S3 GET. So we'll cover that in a second. So IAM access to billing. So essentially enables access to your account activity and your usage reports pages. So on the account activity, you can download your official AWS invoice, which is the PDF. You can look at the line item detail by drilling down on the HTML page, or you can download a CSV report. So and then usage reports is the hourly grain usage data that you can download for a specific product usage type and operation. What's nice about this is it gives you the ability to create a segregation of duties between your accounting or finance people and your technical use. So there's no concerns about giving your accounting folks access to this data, and no concerns over operational impact of them accidentally shutting down an instance that's running a production service. Oops. I'll just give a quick demo on how to, oops. Laptop went to sleep, apologies. All right. So enabling IAM access to billing data is relatively simple. It's a multi-step process. First, you need to go into the IAM console and create a user. So in this particular case, we've created a user for Joe, and we need to apply policy to him to enable access to the account activity and usage reports pages. So we create the policy and apply it to Joe's profile. So they're separate and distinct so that you can segregate between account activity and usage reports. Now, with the portal, the access is bifurcated, so you need to enable access on both sides. So we're going to go to the manager account page here and enable IAM on the portal side as well. Once that is done, you can, yes, sorry, question?
It's possible to bump up the size on this one?
It is not, I believe, I'm sorry. I can make these available afterwards. I'll publish them out so that you can access them. So once you've done that, obviously you can log in as an IAM user and get access to the account activity. It is restricted access. You can't access the security credentials page or some of the other pages that are available.
Where did you go to activate the portal?
Sorry, so it's on the manager account page within the portal. I can send out tech docs and stuff afterwards that explain how to do it. But essentially the key point there is you need to enable it on both sides. We'll have some changes coming up in 2013 that will make that a little bit easier, but in the meantime, it's a two-step process. One enable on console, one enable on the account activity side. All right. So the next feature that we launched was programmatic access to billing data. So we launched this back in June, and what this allows Joe to do is he can get some of these big reports that are available, these CSV reports, pushed directly out to an S3 bucket. And from the S3 bucket, he can either manually download them from the console, or he can build a system to download them manually. So Joe's going to go off and work with some of his tech folks to create an interface and download those programmatically, either off the estimated bill, which is published multiple times a day out to the S3 bucket, or at the end of the month when the bill is finalized. So and I'll give a quick demo on how to set that up as well. So in this particular case, once again, it's enabled within the portal. You visit the billing preferences page and click sign up for programmatic access. What you're going to do here is enter a bucket that you've preferably already set up, but you can do it after the fact. You set up the bucket, and you see it fails initially because what we need to do is we need to apply policy to that S3 bucket, enabling the AWS billing team to write to your bucket. We don't get backdoor access. We have to have you give us permission to write to your bucket as it belongs to you. So it's nice and secure. So then we visit the console. We're going to apply that policy to the bucket. And once that is saved, we can go back and check that the feature is enabled. So once programmatic access has been enabled, we publish your CSV reports out there multiple times per day. And you can go and download them at any time. So they are kept historically. We overwrite the estimated CSV report throughout the month so that you only have one file in there throughout the month, and at the end of the month it's finalized and you start a new estimated file for the following month. So it's available historically as long as you want to keep it there.
What means would be days, would be times per day? Every 2 hours, or every 3 hours, or every 6 hours?
At the moment, it's about every 8 hours. We're working on getting that down so it happens more frequently. So you'll see updates come out from us in 2013 where we're bringing that time period down, but you can expect to see an update to it about 3 times a day. At month end, we skip one just during the build close because our resources are dedicated to closing out the build. So you'll see a final build. So you can access your billing data in a number of different formats. We have the CSV reports, which are available programmatically or on the account activity page. You have the HTML version, which is your account activity page. We also have the PDF invoice, which is your official invoice that your AP department will want to see. And then we send out billing statement emails as well. So what's Joe's next problem? Joe's next problem is he needs to structure his data so he can organize the costs so he can do chargebacks. So what tools have we enabled to give Joe access to do that? Well, first one's consolidated billing. Consolidated billing has been around quite a while, but we'll talk about it anyway because it's still a great mechanism for organizing your account. And the other one is cost allocation reporting, which we launched in August of this year. So consolidated billing. Basically, the benefits is it gives you one invoice and one payment. You can have hundreds or even thousands of linked accounts under a single payer and only get one invoice at the end of the month, which is obviously a big benefit. You consolidate your usage and billing reports across many accounts. So there's multiple benefits to that. One of them is that you get the aggregated tiering benefits of that usage being rolled into a single account. So that kicks in data transfer and storage costs. You can move up through that tiering and get those volume discounts more quickly. Reserved instances that we talked about earlier, you share the benefit across accounts. And so what that means is if you have a reserved instance running, and account A purchased a reserved instance but decided not to run an instance in that particular hour, one of the other accounts in the family gets that benefit as it's passed on across all accounts. You get independent, isolated accounts, but it is dynamic. You can add more accounts at any time to the family. And you get a breakdown of your cost and all of your billing reports by account. So we've seen a lot of customers who are basically using separate accounts to represent different business dimensions, whether that's department or cost center, or even in some cases game or application. So.
Question? When you create a new account,
Yep.
do you have to go through a billing authorization step, like add a credit card and then consolidate, or can you say at that point, I want to consolidate?
You can consolidate it without, but traditionally you have to have the credit card, and then you can basically, you send the invitation out to the account that you want to link, and then group it that way. And we're going to work on some things that make that a little bit simpler so that you can enable them more seamlessly in 2013. So, and then you can get your, sure. You don't have to do anything, we just do it for you. So if you have reserved instances, they're going to get shared across all the accounts as part of the build computation. So as Ranjit alluded to earlier, basically what happens is we aggregate all of the usage with consolidated billing to a single account. So when we calculate the bill, we don't calculate the bill for all of the child accounts. We calculate it for the payer account only. And so the reserved instance benefit is applied as part of that calculation for the payer. Then what we do for the linked accounts, because you want to see that breakdown by linked account, is we allocate the cost back based on the usage. So it becomes interesting and relevant when you talk about reserved instances and on-demand and how they look, because what you end up with is this blended rate. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But what we do is we take that average rate for the cost and we assign it back to the linked accounts based on the usage from that single account. So. Nope, you can launch it from any account. The way that consolidated billing works is we only calculate the bill at the pair. So regardless of where you purchase a reserved instance, the benefit is applied at the pair. So once you have your bill, obviously, you can get the CSV report. And in this particular case, I've turned it into a pretty pivot table here. Wanted to call out the distinction between the payer line items and the linked account line items. So your payer line items are the true bill. These are the ones that end up on that generate the invoice. Then you have your linked account report, which is your allocated costs. So within that CSV report, you have both payer line items and linked account line items. So for some of you, consolidated billing's not enough. You want another layer of... Why what?
Why not just have an account column with every linked account?
We have both.
The numbers are the same. It's like you get everything twice.
Not exactly. So at the payer, you have all the aggregated usage. So it's all linked accounts. And at the linked account level, you just have the usage for that single account. Okay. So that's why we separate them out, so you can see how much it costs each linked account generated. So for some of you, though, the consolidated billings are not enough. You want to add another level of detail, more account metadata, and cost allocation is the mechanism that we've enabled this year to do that. So cost allocation is enabled through tags, and as you can see, you can keep adding metadata to your resources. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So the key construct with cost allocation is tags. So tags are applied at a resource level. You can tag a resource with up to 10 tags per resource. It's a key value pair. So the more structure you apply to how you tag your resources, the easier it is to organize your cost allocation report. Cost allocation then aggregates your cost by tags. So regardless of product, if you use the consistent tag across different resource groups like S3, EC2, RDS, when you look at your cost allocation report, you can aggregate that cost back by the tag and take product out if it's not relevant to you. Sure.
The tags show up in billing reports?
They do. So here we have an example where I've created a pivot off of cost allocation data. So essentially what happens is you manage your tags, and I have a brief demo that will show you how to do that. But in this particular case, I've created an alternate hierarchy of the billing data. We started out with owner and stack, which were two of the tags that I applied to this particular data set. And then we have the standard ones, the standard AWS billing hierarchy of product and line item. So you can see we've reorganized the cost based on the hierarchy that was interesting to me when I was managing my cost. So you can roll it up at any level that you want. So I'll give you a brief video of a demo of how this works. I apologize once again, it's not particularly large, but I'll be happy to share these videos afterwards. Oops. So you enable cost allocation on the billing preferences page. You have to have signed up for programmatic access first. The only way we deliver these reports, because they are large, is via the S3 bucket. So click sign up, and you're all done. Cost allocation is now running. But before you can get a cost allocation report, you need to tag your resources. So we're going to go off to EC2, and we're going to tag an instance now. It's relatively simple. They have console tagging enabled for all services that enable tagging, along with APIs and command line for a number of the services as well. So you tag resources at the service level. I'm going to save our tags here. I'm just going to pause this for a moment to cover a point. So one of the important things to note about tags is that the tag exists from the point in time that it's tagged. And so as Ranjit was saying, there's 744 hours in a 31-day month. So that tag applies from the hour that you applied the tag to the resource. So when you look at your cost allocation report, you're only going to see the tag and that breakout of the data by the tag from the point that the tag was applied.
What access rights are required for tagging?
The same access rights that belong on the resource. So if you have IAM access to that resource, then you can tag it. As of today, AWS hasn't broken out the ability to tag separately.
So if I understood your previous point, I'd get two line items for that resource?
Correct. One without a tag and one with the tag. So obviously the next month you get a full month of tags.
Tags available for Elasticcache clusters yet?
No, they're working on it.
And how about for EMR jobs? So you can tag a job?
You can't tag the job, you can untag the underlying resources. The EMR team is working on it as well.
Can you combine consolidated creating and tagging?
Yes. So you'll get, for cost allocation, you'll get a cost allocation report today only for the consolidated payer. We're working on adding the ability to just look at it for the linked account as well. But today you'll get that report at the CB level, so account can be part of your hierarchy if it's interesting to you.
What's the plan for traffic data and cost allocation?
Data transfer?
Yeah,
Yes, sorry, so data transfer is broken down by tag. So the resource that instantiates the cost of the data transfer will get tagged with a tag for that, for any services where it's enabled. So the list of services today that are enabled for cost allocation are EC2, EBS, S3, RDS, cloud formation, and autoscaling. Other services are working on it. You'll see tagging become a much more kind of first-class entity in AWS. So we'll go back and get this started. So one of the key constructs of cost allocation is that tags are relevant for a lot more than just billing. Tags are a key enabler for billing, but the tags don't exist just for billing. We're seeing people in EC2 already use tagging to manage operational groups or security groups as it's metadata. It's not necessarily important for the cost allocation report only. So by default, tags are not included in the cost allocation report. And so what you need to do is you need to manage the tags. So we'll go back to our video here again. So we have a page here called the Manage Cost Allocation Report. And in here, you're selecting which of the tags that you have applied to your resources you want to include. And so in this case, we're saying we would like example included in our report. And so we're marking it as included. So back to that counter, that tag's only going to be included in the report from the time that we added it to that particular resource. So once you've done that, the report's generated multiple times a day. So once the settings have been set, the next time the report is refreshed, you'll see an updated version of that. Sorry. Yes?
So how sticky are the tags? Are they reset at the end of every month?
Nope. So the tags live forever with the resource until you change them or terminate the resource. So what we're doing here is we're going to go to our S3 bucket and we're going to take a look at our report. Now, I've sped this up, obviously, but you'll see a report the next time it gets refreshed, which is every time we do the estimated billing run. So we're going to go open it in Excel. Obviously, if your report gets really big, you'll need something more. Excel maxes out about 1.2 million rows. So I'm just going to pause for a second there. Oops. Play for one more second. There we go. All right, so basically what you're seeing here is your tags are appended to your cost allocation report as additional columns. The way that they manifest is the key becomes a column and the value gets applied to the row. So every line item is broken out by a distinct combination of tags. So if you have 5 distinct tags on a resource, it gets broken out by that. So that's where you'll see extra line items. So this is still a lot of data to look at like this. So how do we get back to the pivot view? I'm going to create a quick pivot off this just so you can see what we did in the other example. I'm basically going to create my, I've accelerated a little bit here, but in the row labels, you're essentially creating your hierarchy so you can include or not include what is interesting and relevant to you from the whole data set. And as you can see there, we now have a report where we can look at it by application or cost center and see what the specific cost is that we need to charge back to our departments. Yes?
So I think you said that not everything is taggable yet, so that means you can't get a full report based on tags of your whole bill.
Great question. So it is always a full report, but what you'll get is some quote-unquote unlabeled data. So it'll just be organized by the standard billing hierarchy, which is account, product, line item. So it will always tie out with your total statement for the month. It's just that some of it is not tagged, and therefore you can't organize it by those tags.
Allocated to the cost center.
It won't.
It's not tagged.
You'd have to manually do it at that point. So we have about 95% of the total AWS revenue covered with the services that we have today. So, and that's cost allocation. So Joe's next problem is he needs to control his costs. The CFO has said to him, I'm concerned about AWS costs spiraling out of control. What can you do to make sure that there's no surprises at the end of the month? So we launched billing alerts back in March of 2012. Basically, what Billing Alerts allows you to do, it's enabled via CloudWatch. Essentially, we publish the estimated billing data out to CloudWatch, where you can set up custom notifications, various alerts and set on different thresholds. They can be set at a consolidated payer level on the total charges for the month, at the linked account, or even at the product level. So you can get fairly granular in how you define those. We will be adding in the future the ability to set those based on the tags as well. Oops. Give a brief demo on how to set that up. This one is actually very easy. So essentially, you enable it once. Once it's enabled via the account activity page, we start publishing the data out for your account to CloudWatch, and that data is always available. So it takes about 15 minutes the first time for the data to get pushed out to CloudWatch. But once it's there, you can start monitoring your cost. So it looks at the aggregated month-to-date amount. And what we can do is we can set up a notification to go to anyone that we like. So we're going to create an alarm. Joe's going to notify himself in this particular case. So he's going to set it with his email address to send a notification, but it is SNS, so you can use whatever you want. And in this particular case, he's just going to monitor the total charges because he's really just concerned about the total cost. But you can set it at the product level once again. So we create the alarm, and we're now monitoring our cost. Ignore that, it doesn't have data yet. So we go back to our account activity page, and you can see you get a notification there on the account activity page that tells you you've breached your alarm, and you can go back and look at the details. Any questions on billing alerts? Sorry? I believe you can define them via the standard CloudWatch APIs, but I'll take that as an offline question and follow up. Not today. It's something that they're working on. Okay. So what's Joe's next problem? He needs to understand his bill. We hear from time to time that's something that you guys have difficulty with. So what are we doing to make billing transparent? Billing traditionally has become more complex as we've added more variety of features. And so some of the ones that make that complex are the reserved instances, where the only way to understand how we calculated the bill was to look at the data at an hourly granularity. So I'm excited to announce that coming up in the next week or so, we'll be launching detailed billing reports. So essentially, detailed billing reports will give you either daily or hourly grain line items, as opposed to the month-to-date line items that you get today. We have what we call reserved instance affinity. For those of you who are using consolidated billing, reserved instance affinity means that instead of having an average rate across your on-demand and your reserved instance applied in the allocation schema, we'll have a reserved instance affinity. So the benefit of that RI will go to the account that purchased it first instead of being spread across all accounts. And the last one is unblended rates. So we get this a lot. The customer's asking us, how did you come up with that blended rate? Well, it's the average of everything from the payer for that same usage type and operation. So by unblending the rates, we're going to create a distinct line item for each rate. So an example of this is the hourly usage. You can see here in this particular example that the customer has 4 reserved instances that they've purchased across this account. And between, my graph was backwards. Between 7 and 8, they only used 3 instances that met the profile of those reserved instances. And so therefore they have underage. Those 2 hours are actually lost. They won't get the benefit of that rate for this month. The inverse of that is when we were running more instances than we had reserved instances for, and you got charged the on-demand rate. So with this hourly grain data, you can go in and you can look at this data and graph it like this and understand why you got charged on-demand versus reserved instance. The other one is the unblended rates. So in this particular example, Joe has 3 linked accounts. On account 1, he's purchased 2 fixed RIs. Fixed RIs have an hourly usage rate of $0. You can see here on your payer line items that the fixed and the on-demand were charged at the right rate. But when we've done the linked account allocation with blended rates, we've figured out what the average cost is, which is about 9 cents a unit. And we've applied that in the allocation. So based on the usage from each of those accounts, they all ended up with a blended rate. And account 1 that purchased those fixed reserved instances and paid that upfront cost has actually ended up with a monthly charge of $143. There we go. So we have blended rate. So let's try that again with unblended rates. So at the payer, it's still the same. But at the child account, the linked account allocation, what we've done is we've applied the benefit of that reserved instance rate to account 1. And their unblended rate and their unblended cost for this month is now $0. And accounts 2 and 3 paid the on-demand rate of 15 cents a unit, and their cost has subsequently gone up. So that allocation of that cost is more real representation of the actual purchasing and planning ahead that these accounts have done. So if you look at them side by side, you can see the blended cost and the unblended cost. So account 1 went from $143 down to $0. Accounts 2 and 3 obviously paid the on-demand. Now, we'll continue to show you both of these in the report because at the end of the day, they're an allocation of cost, and you can pick which one is most relevant to the way that you model your business. So you'll have the unblended cost and the unblended rate in one column, and the blended and unblended cost in the other columns. So.